Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Quantum Sparks class. Today, we're going to talk about invisible agreements, the life you didn't mean to build. As always, knowledge is just potential. Execution is power. So as we go through today's program, make sure to have a pen and paper available so that you can take some notes so that you can go execute on some of the topics we're going to share today. The quote we'll start with is the first step toward change is awareness. The second step toward change is acceptance. What is awareness? Awareness is a state or condition of being conscious of something, having knowledge or perception of a situation or fact. Acceptance is the willingness to tolerate a situation without attempting to change it. What we're not talking about today is surrender. So acceptance and surrender often get confused with one another. Both acceptance and surrender involve letting go of resistance, but they're definitely not the same. One marks the beginning of disengagement, and the other is a threshold into deep presence and empowerment. So acceptance is tolerating the unchanged. As at its most common level, acceptance is a passive state. It occurs when someone acknowledges a condition, a circumstance, a behavior, and then chooses not to resist it, even if it's misaligned or uncomfortable or unfulfilling. This form of acceptance is rooted in tolerance, a willingness to endure without changing it. And it can be useful in small doses, but over time, it often leads to stagnation, numbness, and resignation. Acceptance and surrender are two different types of energy. Many years ago, I wrote a blog post, and it was about an old coffee maker that sat on my counter. And this coffee maker, it was like a Keurig coffee maker, and it had stopped working. And so I left the coffee maker there and I tinkered with it for a couple of weeks trying to get the coffee maker to go back to normal working, and it never really worked again, to the point I stopped using it. And then 2 years went by with the coffee maker still on the counter. And one day I was walking by it and I said, "Holy cow, that's been there for 2 years." It's something that I accepted. It wasn't a conscious choice to accept having a broken coffee maker on my counter for 2 years. It was a short-term acceptance that turned into an unnoticing. And so I wrote about it because I said, what other things are we not noticing in our lives? That it was something we accepted to the point it just became part of our life, to the point that oftentimes it can actually define our life. Life outcomes are often shaped by unexamined acceptance rather than conscious decision. Going back to the coffee maker, I didn't decide one day I was going to leave a broken coffee maker on my counter for years. It became unconscious. Unnoticed shift. Tolerated conditions become fixtures when we don't challenge them. It is a slow erosion. Awareness fades away when it's not followed by action. In other words, the unacceptable becomes the new normal. Acceptance is directional. So, passively accepting something influences a life trajectory. In other words, life mirrors what we tolerate. So, what are you accepting in your life? Maybe it's staying in a friendship that feels one sided or draining. Maybe it's accepting a chronic health issue and just ignoring it. Maybe it's tolerating emotional patterns like guilt or shame or anxiety and just thinking to yourself, this is normal, to the point that you just simply stop noticing it. Or living in a cluttered or uninspiring space without questioning why. Or simply accepting fatigue or burnout as just part of life. What about in business? What are you accepting? Maybe it's your branding materials that you've had forever, a headshot, an old logo that you made years ago, or just marketing that no longer represents your expertise or value. It's just pieces that you've had forever that you stopped noticing them. Maybe it's the way you have lead follow up. Maybe you have come to just accept the excuse of being too busy, and so you allow leads to go cold, or you're missing out on long term opportunity. Maybe it's toxic client relationships, continuing to work with clients who are just disrespectful, unresponsive, or uncommitted because a deal is a deal. Have you stopped noticing the types of client relationships that you're willing to accept? Could be low standards in your presentation, poor time boundaries, accepting texts from a client at 11 o'clock at night and responding back, working every weekend, having no control over your schedule. Maybe that has become so normal that you don't even realize that you're accepting it anymore. Maybe it's the lack of market mastery, telling yourself, I'll learn it when I need to, instead of staying on top of the newest trends or the newest inventory and pricing. Fear based pricing advice. Maybe you've become so used to advising clients to just overprice a listing or accepting their overpriced listing out of fear of losing a transaction, even when it conflicts with market data. Or maybe it comes down to accepting the commission that somebody is willing to pay to you instead of having uncomfortable conversation about money with clients. What are you accepting in your business? Remember that your clients hire you because of the bar you set. So, what are you willing to accept? The bar you set determines how smooth the transaction will go, how the property will represent on the market, and how much your client will net. Our clients are hiring us because of what we are willing to accept. It's okay to remind your clients of that. It's okay to let your clients know that what makes you different than millions or hundreds of thousands or thousands of real estate people is what you're willing to accept for your business, which translates into what you're willing to accept when it comes to marketing a property or when it comes to negotiating on behalf of your buyer or seller. So there is a trajectory of acceptance. This goes back to anything, whether it be a broken coffee maker that you've left on your countertop for years, or accepting how clients treat you, or accepting the presentation materials that you've been using. It starts with an awareness, an initial recognition that something is misaligned or something is broken, like the coffee maker. And then it's a hesitation. It's a delay in taking action on the thing that you are aware of. The third part is a rationalization. So we've moved from awareness to hesitation to rationalizing, where we begin to make excuses for the misalignment. It then moves on to repetition. We are consistently re-exposed to this misalignment, and then the misalignment becomes familiar. It becomes so familiar that it then integrates into our lives. The misalignment becomes part of our environment and is so ingrained in us that we no longer notice it. We have moved now to unawareness. It fades from our conscious attention. And then life reorients around the tolerated condition. It becomes a complete identity shift. This is what we mean when we say we have these invisible agreements in our lives where we have agreed to become this person by what we are choosing to accept. Awareness, recognition that something is off, misaligned, or not optimal. So let's go through each of the pieces of the trajectory. So we started with our simple awareness, the coffee machine is broken. We then hesitate to do anything about it. We keep putting it off. We delay, we avoid to take corrective action, maybe because we're so busy, we have other things, maybe because we're so distracted in a world that is created to distract us that we just don't do anything about it. Then occasionally we notice that we still haven't fixed this misalignment we have. So we begin justifying this condition with statements like, you know what, it's not that bad. It's a little coffee maker on the counter. Or it'll get better. Eventually I'll have some time and I will get rid of the coffee maker and get a new one. But over time, you keep seeing it. You see the misalignment day in and day out, and all of a sudden you stop even noticing it. That is because of the repetition. It is the continued exposure. And that continued exposure leads to desensitization. We're no longer sensitive to the fact that we are misaligned with something in our environment or in our life. And then we become indifferent. Indifference often precedes unconscious acceptance. Apathy ends up replacing our discomfort. We stop engaging with the problem. It is the emotional numbing that signals our resignation. It accelerates the unawareness and allows the misalignment to entrench and embed itself in life. The condition becomes a permanent part of the environment. And then we are no longer aware. The issue disappears from our active consciousness. It has just become part of our life. And we become what we have accepted. It is the final step, which is the identity shift. The tolerated becomes part of lifestyle. It becomes part of your identity, and it is the new you. What is the cost of this type of unchecked acceptance? Well, it lowers your standards. I'd say both personal and business, it plays a role in. It shrinks your potential, and it truly shapes your long-term outcomes. Acceptance becomes part of our self-narrative. So what we accept shapes the story that we tell ourselves about who we are. And over time, the repeated acceptance of misalignment becomes an internal identity. We say to ourselves, this is just who I am. And this masks a life built from silent compromise. Let's go back to the energy of acceptance. And this is important, and this is why I started today by talking about the difference between surrender and acceptance, because they are two completely different energies. Passive acceptance is disengagement. It's low momentum, it's low energy, it's resignation. Conscious acceptance, this can radiate peace and clarity and resolve. The energy behind acceptance determines whether it will lead to a transformation or a limitation. Hold on, we froze here while this is unfreezing itself. I want to talk for a moment about surrender only because this all goes back to energy, which is what the Quantum Sparks program is all about. And in previous Quantum Sparks classes, we talked about a willingness to surrender. But surrender is an energy release that is born of awareness. It is born of trust. It's not just tolerating something, it is transcending something. So acceptance involves putting up with something, whereas surrender involves letting go of control. It is letting go of judgment or force in favor of flow, clarity, and aligned action. Whoops, I'm going to hold on a second. There we go. Both acceptance and surrender involve letting go of resistance, but one is the beginning of disengagement and the other is empowerment. So, how do we design a life instead of just letting a life design itself by default? Well, awareness has to be reclaimed intentionally. Living intentionally requires continual observation. So, reawakening requires feeling again, and it requires that we care enough to notice and to act, to do something. It is an ongoing practice of observing what's around us and what we are accepting, reflecting on why we're accepting it, and recalibrating. It is stopping for a moment and saying, why is that broken coffee maker still on the counter 2 years later? When did I stop noticing? Notice what you are accepting. So audit your life and your surroundings. What no longer aligns with your desired life? Listen to the words you use. Phrases like when you catch yourself saying, it is what it is. This might be a signal of passive acceptance. Track your emotions. Numbness or disconnection reveals often a silent compromise, something that you've just chosen to ignore so long that you're no longer reacting emotionally to it. And then evaluate your routines. Ask yourself about your routines, daily life, and in your business. Is the routine still serving me? And then reflect on discontent. Where do you feel stuck? Because oftentimes the places where you feel stuck are often hidden acceptance. You feel stuck because it's something you wish you weren't accepting. Reflect on those and change them. What are the things you're avoiding? Avoidance often reveals as well what we are silently accepting. And then begin changing the story you have with yourself. Reclaim the authorship over your own narrative, your own story. So, the steps to reawakening yourself, to become aware again, well, number one, interrupt the pattern. Pause long enough to question, what is it that you've stopped noticing? Two, name it. Put words to what no longer is serving you. Bring the things that you are tolerating back into your conscious focus. Reignite the awareness around the things you've become unconscious about. And challenge your own rationalizations. Would I choose this again if I had it to do over again? And slowly withdraw your integration. Begin detaching your identity from the condition that you've been accepting. Take small steps, small shifts in environment or behavioral signal new standards for yourself. Just a small little thing. Anchor a new standard. Define what alignment looks like for you and then protect it. The ultimate value of life depends upon your awareness. It is the power of contemplation rather than mere survival. As always, you could check out our past Quantum Sparks class at layerrealty.com/quantum sparks. By the way, we're going to continue on this subject. If you receive our Mindful Monday, we're going to continue on this subject in today's Mindful Monday that will go out this afternoon. And by the way, if you have a question you want us to cover in a future Quantum Sparks, you can go to layerrealty.com/ask anything. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.